World Environment Day greetings to all of you. Thank you, Dr. Bichu Kumar. Thank you for organizing this. Yes, I'm in Rome, but my heart is, of course, in India. And as I go back to 50 years ago at Stockholm, a very historic happening was also taking place in our mountains in India. Women were coming out to protect the trees, and the Chipko movement started in the early 70s. And I think Indira Gandhi was right in telling the West not to preach, because the Western model of development based on fossil fuels, industrialism, replacing human energy with energy slaves, as Emery Lovins has said. Emery Lovins has said, America is not more productive than other countries if you take the energy slaves into account, because behind every American is about 300 invisible slaves, which are in the form of energy, but they're still putting pressure on the Earth's resources. The very word environment has never appealed to me. I never use it. I never call myself an environmentalist. I call myself an ecologist, because ecology means our relationships, and we are part of the Earth. We are not separate from the Earth. Another very important quotation from Indira Gandhi in 1972 is she reminded the world that, we are a culture of non-violent relationship with the Earth. She cited from the Atharva Ved, let me not dig so deep into you, dear Earth, that it harms you and hurts you. That too was a very important international conversation where India's ecological civilization and its foundations of a living Earth were brought to the world. Let's not forget that the West has spent about 400 years killing the Earth, not just physically, but intellectually. The dead Earth paradigm was a result of a lot of intellectual work. The work of Bacon, who said, nature has to be subjugated. The idea that nature is alive is an effeminate idea, and I'm going to build a masculine birth of time. The Royal Society of England actually says that it was founded to implement Bacon's idea of masculine science, a science that dominates over nature, a science that is about mastery of nature, reducing nature to a slave. He says that in his text, that nature is a slave who you must enslave and exploit and be mastery over. Now, that worldview was very necessary for colonialism, because if the philosophy was, dear Earth, let us not harm you, how would we be moving JCBs around the way we do? Yeah, I think the JCBs are so against India's ecological civilization. And from the beginning to now, I really find them an unnecessary, violent instrument brought for war against the Earth. Yes, they make us move things faster. But if you then take another element of both science, general relativity, that space and time are interconnected, as well as our philosophy of four-dimensional causality of Desh and Kal. Desh Kal, Desh space, Kal time, are inseparable. And the minute you push time too much, you are going to conquer more space, more ecological space, and the homes of more species. I was recently in Trivandrum for the Mathrubhumi centennial and for Virendra Kumarji's second death anniversary. And I said this, Tagore reminded us that the Western civilization is always running for speed. And the defining of the word for speed is progressive. He says, but you don't ask a tree, where are you progressing? Because a tree is rooted, it's growing. And its growth cannot be defined as progress in terms of movement in time, in space. And then he also says, it's all right to ask about a train. Did it progress from station A to station B? But you cannot ask of a living world, did you progress? Because the living world evolves, it's self-organized, it sustains itself and sustains everyone else. the word growth and development have been so dominant as brushing any ecological destruction. This is necessary for growth. But what is growth? Growth was created during the war. It is mobilizing resources away from society in order to finance wars. So it is in fact taking what is circular systems of circulation of wealth. And the data is clear in India. About 600 units of any production used to stay in a village till British rule. 400 left, of which only 100 went to a centralized authority. The majority stayed in the village to maintain the tanks, the schools, the temples, whatever were the institutions of the public good. It was flipped once the British extraction and Lagan came. 300 stayed in the village and the rest went straight to England. 45 trillion was extracted from India. And the idea of property was created 1759 or 89. Lord Cornwallis, one stroke of a pen, the land of India became property of England. And I remember when I was doing my work and wrote the Ecology and Politics of Survival, and I was looking through archives of all kinds on the forestry question, which was the big question at that time. There was even a declaration by the Queen that the teak of Malabar was their property. And the king had to write to her, say, you've forgotten, I'm the king here. You're not the queen here. And this teak doesn't belong to you. So this idea of property and enclosing the commons was part of colonialism. And it went hand in hand with the mechanical mindset. How does it violate our ecological civilization? In my view, this year's Environment Day needs to be a year of pause and reflection. If we continue on the false path of cutting every tree that comes in the way of a highway, taking the last grain of gravel and sand out of the rivers to construct something, there is no river. And I watch the entrails of the earth being removed. It's like her intestines are being pulled out and her hair's being chopped down, and we have objectified our view and forgotten the worldview of India and the ecological civilizational roots of India. Destroying our ecological foundations is precisely what Indira Gandhi was pointing to, that we are threatening the survival of our own species. We used to call it survival, now it's called extinction. The extinction of 200 species a day includes with it species of the human community who are being driven out. Look at the trades. When 50 years ago, I think in every town we used to see hundreds of thousands of people, someone cleaning cotton wool, cobblers in every street corner, making shoes. Of course, street foods of the most amazing kind, which were all made illegal with what I call the pseudo-hygiene and pseudo-sanitary laws of industrial food safety, saying anything touched by hand is dangerous, that you have to put it through a hexane and toxic chemicals, and then it becomes clean. So another revisit we need to have is the idea of clean. The idea of clean for us as an ecological civilization is, A, it's not harming others. 2, it's not dangerous for your health. So wash your hands, keep ourselves clean. And I always get surprised how even the workers of Kerala are in the most white clothing, so sitting and reading newspapers at the construction site. That recognition of cleanliness as a relationship of non-harm, very different from a notion of cleanliness of extermination. 2 examples. Now, every time they talk about cleaning the city, they talk about removing the homes of the poor. Every time they talk about cleaning a place, is chop down the trees. Trees are seen as an obstruction. I've grown up in India where there were more forests on the farms, more trees on the farms of India. And now if you go to Punjab, there's not a tree, because that industrial mode of agriculture is an extermination mode of agriculture, cannot tolerate diversity. It could not have evolved the amazing spice gardens of really four-dimensional cultivation, harvesting every bit of sunshine to maximize photosynthesis, and not just to maximize photosynthesis to convert into biomass, but to convert in the most amazing, healing, delicious, tasty spices that made India the center of trade. That photosynthetic conversion, with the brilliance of the spice gardens and the generosity of the climate in your part of the world, converted into cash. Look at the money it generated. We were 25% of the world economy for spices, for your little pepper, for your little cardamom. We've forgotten, it's been erased from our history. You talk to a young person, first of all, they don't know what spices are. Secondly, they don't know how they grow. And thirdly, they don't know they were the root of the fact that because of our spices, the world came to us. And as Tagore said, people came from the East and the West, and they came from all religions. And we wove garlands of love. It's the third or fourth paragraph in our national anthem, where we don't reach. But in any case, our national anthem is about our ecology. It's about our geography. It is not about this much trillion there, this much trillion there. You can chop a tree and create growth. You can build another highway and some contractors get good money for a short while of time. You know, I am in Italy and I was just in Naples, where when the volcano near Pompeii burst, there was another city, another port, a trading city. It was buried, and it was found, and it absolutely intact 2,000 years ago. The heart of Naples, 2,000 years ago, a city. And we are always made to believe history begins with colonialism and the Industrial Revolution. So we need a decolonized understanding of the planet. The planet is not dead. The planet is living. And ecological civilization is care for the planet, as the phrase Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, that the earth is one family. And this is mine, this is yours, this is a stranger, this is a relative, is the thinking of a petty mind. An evolved mind sees the whole world as one earth family and all species as our relatives. This became the thesis of our International Biodiversity Congress that we organized, Vandana and CISSA organized in Dehradun at the FRI in 2018. Another very important element is the issue of the sharing, the enclosures. The British colonialism was based on creating private property and enclosing what belonged to the commoners. 200 years they tried, but it was the same for the land in India. That's what started the whole privatization of land, the zamindari question. It is what allowed in recent times, the privatization of seed, and it's to challenge that privatization that I started Navdanya. And the work in Navdanya shows very clearly that another dichotomy that was created in Western colonizing thought is, of course, we are apart from nature. Nature is there, and we are here, and we are the masters. But more importantly, it goes on to talk about biodiversity as wild and production as industrial. And it totally missed out this very large space of production with biodiversity. Our economies, your spice gardens, are a model of biodiverse-based production, where biodiversity is the means of production, biodiversity is the product of production, biodiversity is our co-creator, and that model is what we need to develop more deeply. We practiced it as a civilization, but we haven't articulated it as an economy. We need to move from extractive economies to living circular economies where everything recycles. And there is no waste, zero waste. But you cannot have a living system without mutual exchange, without symbiosis. And that means you have to have diversity. The same thing has nothing to give to the same thing. Yeah? But diversity, the fungi has a lot to give to the plant. The nitrogen fixing plants have a lot to give to edible cereals. This mutuality and diversity go hand in hand, and living systems are self-organized systems. Very important part of our ecological civilization is the part of the Isha Upanishad that Gandhi summarized in "The earth has enough for everyone's needs, but not for a few people's greed." The Upanishad itself says the earth is permeated by divinity and it's for all beings. You can enjoy the gifts without greed. Now that is the key word. It says enjoy. It's not saying punish yourself, kill yourself, deprive yourself. Enjoy yourself, but be very aware of not enjoying through greed, because greed means being indifferent to other people's needs. And just like you have a right to enjoy the clean air, to enjoy the clean water, to enjoy the good food, other beings, other human beings have the right to share in that. So I see the Isha Upanishad as really a declaration of life as a commons. Life as a commons in which the last being has a right to participate and a duty to contribute to. Because in the web of life, you cannot take without giving. In the web of life, responsibilities and rights are just the two sides of the same flow. I want to wrap up with saying that we are at a very strange moment. We are at a crossroads. We are at a moment where movements, scientific work, and a regeneration of ecological civilization. And this morning I had to get up very early because I received the John Cobb Award. It was evening time for them in California, but it was 3 a.m. for me. And I got up, and it's amazing. It's a world forum on ecological civilization. And the Americans are there, the Chinese are there, and and it's basically about building post-industrial, post-modern societies so that we can live at peace with the earth. That means a regeneration of the earth and ecological thinking. On the other hand, is a reinforcement and fast forward of the same greed-based, mechanical, industrial thinking, which has brought the world to the brink, created climate change, created the extinction crisis, the poverty crisis, the hunger crisis. Take anything, you touch on it, and it comes out, the root of it is someone took too much for profits. And in that model, the economy is not the real resources that flow, the amount of water flowing in rivers and its cleanliness, the amount of fish the fisher folk can catch. But the measure is the money that can be made by extraction or whatever. That means reducing living systems to commodities. And commodities then get measured in their value in money. The two mistakes that this created, and they're violent mistakes, is first, different things were treated as the same thing. For example, organic food was treated the same as industrial food. Your wonderful coconut oil wasn't just treated as the same as palm oil and soya oil. All kinds of literature was written in scientific journals of how dangerous coconut oil is for you and how healthy palm oil is for you or soya oil is for you. And that manufacture of the scientific opinion through money, I have watched it in the GMO question, where the Monsantos of the world rule the day. And now the Gates of the world don't want you to eat fish. They don't want you to have milk. They're talking about cow-free milk, ocean-free fish, farmer-free food, fisherman-free food. And this is what they're calling the green economy and the blue economy. Tomorrow, I would have been at a big blue-green conference. in Milan, held by the biggest newspaper of Italy. And yesterday evening, I was informed that Bayer is sponsoring that question, Bayer who bought up Monsanto. And I sent a message to the organizers and I said, I cannot be on the same platform as those who have declared war against knowledge, war against our health, and war against the health of the planet. A second error, so there's this ontological error of mistaking good things with bad things. Even in the zero budget is, we will keep emitting carbon dioxide, but we will take your soil measurements in order to offset our pollution with your soil. But that will mean a new policing system, a new eco-imperialism. This is what Indira Gandhi was warning against and resisting, because she stood for a sovereign India. She stood for an ecologically civilized India. She stood for non-alignment, and she stood tall against all the superpowers. But the biggest trick that's being played right now is the same people who brought us the green revolution in chemicals, Rockefeller Foundation, have joined hands with the New York Stock Exchange and the Latin American Bank. Three guys sit in a room at a table and say, oh, you know, no, let's now make natural asset management companies and call it nature's economy. And what's an asset, financial asset? That the same house was sold many times over in the subprime crisis, which brought the world's economy to collapse. We were insulated because we had strong financial regulation and very strong conversion of currencies regulation. Right now, the whole issue of the wheat scare, for which India did not export wheat, most of it, it's a small part is the Ukraine war. The very big part is speculation. The financial asset management companies have jumped onto real things like food that people need. Who are the financial management companies? I have a book called Oneness versus 1%. I was trying to figure out what's happening to the world in 2015. And we realized that, Monsanto, Coca-Cola, Amazon, they're not owned by small hundreds of shareholders and stockholders. 70% of the ownership of every company is in the hands of 3 to 4 asset management companies. BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, and another. These asset management companies are the holders of the assets of the billionaires. 10 billionaires control 40% of the wealth of the world. 10 men. 10 men. Now, that level of inequality has come from fictitious finance. Already when I wrote my books in the past, I was talking about how the fictitious finance economy is 70 times bigger than the real goods and services produced in the world. Now, when they're talking about speculation on nature, selling nature as assets, by the Biodiversity Convention is being dismembered right now, where Mr. Dasgupta, fellow Indian, was appointed to declare biodiversity not as life, not as the web of life, not as the relationships between beings, but as an asset on the financial system. And that means the species that cannot be made money out of can be allowed to go extinct. That same pressure has been brought on our Biodiversity Act, where the word biodiversity is being replaced by biodiversity, biological resource. Biodiversity is an autonomous, self-organized being, living organism of intrinsic worth. A resource is that which you will exploit. So an asset and a resource is the word. So that whole idea of a dead earth, raw material to be exploited by the billionaires. What this will do is take entire areas and ecosystems, and through these asset management companies, make it their controlled assets. They will decide what people can do. They have already started uprooting indigenous people from forests under managing the forests. They will take rivers and manage them for maximizing extractivism. They will take the oceans. And of course, they'll ban the traditional fishermen. And then the trawlers will go out and fish. This system is being looked at, right now. The assessment of nature's goods and services is 125 trillion. By speculating and buying and selling the same river 5,000 times, buying and selling the same forest hundreds of times on Wall Street through algorithms and 24-hour exchanges run totally digitally by quants, as they call it. They are looking at a $4,000 trillion economy. This will create the ultimate recipe for extinction, because those who extract do not care. Those who profit blindly through greed do not conserve. Regeneration, conservation, and caring is a relationship of care with recognition that the earth is alive, all her species are alive, her rivers and her mountains are alive, and our duty is to protect them and through them create a living economy. Well, we've done that for thousands of years. It is time to remember how we were a prosperous land and how to not become part of a new colonization, a new carbon colonization as false solutions to climate change, a new financial colonization where 4,000 trillions move around and they will just go and tell Sri Lanka, oh, you're in debt. You needed this many billion, here it is, but your island belongs to us. That's why we have to become free of debt and we have to regenerate our autonomy, self-organization, and our creative, non-violent circular economies. For scientists and youth, it is a very exciting moment because it means the highest level of imagination that we can mobilize. The option is slavery first and then extinction. And I'm sure each of you will make a choice through your work, no matter what the work is, to create a resurgence of India and her ecological civilization. Thank you.